All right, so some kind of psychology. All right, so we're going to get into some psychology part here. Thought, consciousness, self-awareness, emotion, identity, and theory of mind. So part of the AGI needs to have the process of thought. I mentioned a moment ago that the thought process is continuously happening every second. That's roughly the time period that a thought happens in our brains, and we want to replicate that in an AGI. So how does the thought works? Okay, so think about it this way. I have a thought about something, and then typically in short-term memory, you have 7 different thoughts kind of swinging in that memory envelope. When you think about one thing, your brain goes out to your long-term memory and tries to pull back everything that's associated with that specific memory. And once you have that specific memory, now you start going off into deep thought. And Maria and I have this conversation all the time. Like, how'd you get to that specific thought? Like, you get to a whole different location. And that's because at that very moment, that person can swing through maybe 100 different scenarios within like that split 2 seconds. Because what happens is, as you saw earlier, you saw the neuron spread out into different pieces, and it just kept cascading like that. That similar concept you want to kind of put into this AGI that is able to go from one thought to another, and be able to constantly keep building upon that. So when I mentioned earlier, there's 60 to 80,000 thoughts that we have a day. We physically have that many a day. That's a lot. So you need thought to help with consciousness, and that's kind of what we're going to get into next. So consciousness is the awareness of one's body, one's environment, but not self-awareness. So if you have an AGI system, it's supposed to be conscious enough to understand its physical body and physical environment. I mentioned earlier, dealing with the Unreal Engine, for example, when people test things, it's not conscious in there. It's just kind of going over a specific artificial narrow intelligent way, the ANI way. But what you want to do is build a system that can figure out, okay, this is my environment. This is what I got going on. Self-direct its own goals and figure out what it can do in this environment without being told. And that's interesting because in a lot of the AGI stuff we talked about earlier, a lot of things that people use in the Unreal Engine is that they focus on, here's a specific task, I gave you the task, and you figure it out. And that's how that works, specific task. But in AGI is, here's this area, and figure it out. So for example, if I talk about, again, my son, for example, I didn't tell him to, see that particular ball over there, but because the fact that he experimented with it, he likes it. The goal is next time he sees it, he wants to get it. I didn't tell him to do this, but that's something that a learning mechanism has able to do on its own. So what is the consciousness to thought? All right, so I mentioned earlier about this first thought again. So at nighttime, and this is where we get into the brain is actually able to reorganize its thoughts. So we need to have a system that can be able to reorganize its thoughts and learn. Actually, that's why we sleep. Our brains don't actually turn off when we're sleeping. It's actually reorganizing and putting everything into a proper place. So when you're actually trying to go day to day, you're actually better off. And what I mean by that is, you ever try to learn something at nighttime before you go to sleep? Do that. By next morning, it should actually be a lot more better connected than it was if you learned it at 8 o'clock in the morning. Because sleep actually allows that time period to do the learning, because it shuts off the working memory. The working memory is able to function continuously, but the working memory is not off. Let me rephrase that. The working memory for the conscious state is off. So you turn off your part of your brain so you can focus on actually just your thalamus is what it is. Your thalamus turns off all sensory systems. So you're not able to actually take in any sensory. Now, in some cases, your brain will heighten awareness, your sensory system, if it noticed something odd. But that's why you have like high sounds or things change like that, then it will actually start flooding through. But if things are consistently in sound or consistently, your eyes are closed, which is consistent, your brain would turn off your thalamus would turn off the sensory system and allow your brain to reorganize its thoughts while you're sleeping, while you change your phase and memory. So when you wake up, right, that's when the thalamus allows sensory system in, your brain starts functioning on the conscious state again, and then you'll say, like I said earlier, I see the sun is outside, because typically you wake up in the dark, but it's sunny outside. Whoa. Your eyes flood the retina in. Afterwards, you realize it's sunny outside. That's one thought. Next thought, wait, what time is it? Next thought, each happening each second, cascading from one graph to the next. And do you guys know what I mean by when I say graph? So when I mean, I'll just say it anyway. When I say graph, what it means is it's interconnected things that are close by to each other. That's what I mean by graph. So the first thing I think about when I see sunny outside is what time is it? Because that's the first thing that I think of when I see sunny outside, because of what I've learned in the past. See the phone, turn the phone on. Those are actions. Time, set a clock. Crap, I got to jump out of bed. And these are all response systems I mentioned earlier, which is recognition and response. So what is self-awareness? Self-awareness is taking your consciousness and observing it. So you're able to say, okay, I not only understand my environment that I'm in, and not only understand that I am acting in this environment, but I'm observing myself acting in this environment, that's a whole different level of intelligence. A lot of animals out there can't do this, can't observe itself, but we can. And that's what makes intelligence for us, is that, and it typically happens for babies between 15 to 24 months old, where it begins to not only observe the surroundings around them, begin to start observing their own thoughts and mind about what they're thinking about and why they're thinking this way. So the 5 levels of awareness. Typically around birth, there's nothing. You just exist. In 2 months, you start recognizing other things separate from itself. Around 18 months, your basic self-awareness learns, you can start seeing things in the mirror, start recognizing, maybe that's me. 2 or 3 years, you start realizing who you are physically in a state is not going to change. This is me. And then typically around 4 or 5 is when you start realizing, whoa, this is me, and other people are seeing me. And that's when we start having our self-conscious state where like, what I need to do to keep myself from being alienated, or the thoughts of I'm going to get hurt, or whatever the things that other people have interactions with myself. That's the kind of you went to self-preservation kind of kicks in around that time period. And that's the 5th, and I believe the last state of self-awareness. And this is where AGI kicks in, because it's assuming that it has same principles as human beings, it will be able to evolve to this. All right, so early stage in AGI, we should not have any self-awareness. However, we could have consciousness. Now, people think this is a really taboo statement. But like I said, it's nothing more than just being able to observe the environment and observe yourself. My hands, and knowing I have hands, and knowing that I have. Now, not observing my mental mind or my brain, but observing that I can operate in this environment. That's pretty much what it is. It can be able to do. Theory of mind. This is actually super important. Theory of mind is being able to understand not only myself and my identity, but understand others and their identity as well. This is super important because when you're dealing with an AGI system, you want it to identify other people and understand its intelligence as well, and its connection to me. And what theory of mind also does is mix a representation of the world, what's true and what's not true. So for example, I may see another person go over there and open a door. I know what's behind the door, but I have to understand that person may not know what's behind that door. That's theory of mind. The observation of not just myself, but observation of other people acting and doing other things as well. So for example, I'll say a little kid or a little baby begins to understand theory of mind getting older because they're able to understand how the parents operate. The parents walk in, the parents do certain things, and they can predict what the parent's going to do because they see the person, they have this theory of mind that has been developed over time. Theory of mind is actually probably one of the most important parts of AGI because it's kind of connected to the identity. And this is what let's say, for example, you have millions, billions of images you've seen, or things you heard, or things you felt. What this does is it kind of bubbles it up to the top and brings out kind of like the representation of everything I've learned in one place, in one time. And it goes through my theory of mind. So the identity. The identity is similar to that. Observing everyone else, but it's designed to observe myself. It's kind of like, of everything I've learned, is what do I think of myself? And I know this might think this sounds philosophical, but what I'm getting at is it will create its goals. It would know what its goal is continuously, constantly shifting these goals around in the identity. It will also always keep up with how it feels and how it thinks, and knows what's true and what's not for itself. So it's self-belief about what is right and what's wrong. And this is what the AGI should learn. This is the part that people are trying to work on now. And if you ever heard these discussions about, how we should make AGI moral or not, how do we embed systems in it so it doesn't kind of like go out of whack and start doing things bad. Kind of here is where we're kind of working on this, to make the AGI system be able to understand certain rules. And they say, well, how do we code this? How do we make the system do it? It has to learn it on its own in order for it, and we can't, as human beings, we can't tell it what to do because who says we're right? So that kind of goes into that. How am I going on time? Oh, am I going over? Oh. All right, so quickly I'm going over joining consciousness and self-awareness, theory of mind, kind of bring these things together. And I brought up two movies, two shows. Did I put it on here? Maybe I did. All right, so self-talk. I mentioned it earlier. Again, you constantly do the course of the day. The AGI will need to do this. It has to do this. It has to constantly keep thinking. It has to be autonomous. So, and that thinking process will lead to an explosion of information within itself. So, there's a movie called Beautiful Mind. Saw this many, many years ago. It's a professor who had an obstruction to his theory of mind. He pretty much was a smart guy, super smart mathematician, but one of the problems he had was he began to see other people, people that didn't exist, because he had, I guess, schizophrenia or something like that. And the problem was, it wasn't like anything was wrong, he just had some obstruction to the theory of mind. He assumed that someone else existed when he didn't. It wasn't true, but his mind believed it did. This guy here, Mr. Robot, it's a good show. He has a similar concept. He thinks the guy back there is real. He's not. That's his dad in the past. He got hurt in the head, and same similar situation. He has an obstruction to his theory of mind. Why do I bring this up? Because when you build an AGI, it could build things that are not real. It can act on things that are not true, and even though it may have the best intention in mind, it can do things that are not correct. So you have to understand how to build AGI where it composes similar theory of mind as we do, or at least try to build it in that way. That's going to be kind of hard to build, because theory of mind is something that's not easy to construct because it's kind of constructed by ourselves. This is a black box system observed by everyone before us. Imagine the time period imagine the time back in like the Renaissance time period or back in the Roman time period. Killing someone wasn't bad to some degree. They did it and didn't care much. Now in today's world, the theory of mind is you don't do that. But back then, they had a different theory of mind. So time also makes a difference. So we have to figure out how to know what is part of theory of mind. Is it part of what's currently now or not?